Okay, today we're talking about matzah. Of course, matzah is a food we eat on Pesach, lots of it, and we particularly eat it at the start. And all matzah looks the same to most people. You just look at it, it all looks the same. And very simple ingredients, just flour and water. But if you poke around a little bit, you find out that there are differences between one and the next. This year I got to go to 5 different matzah bakeries, and I've been in other ones beforehand. And although the finished product basically looks the same by everybody, give or take, there's halachic differences between how this person does it versus that one. I'm not going to mention any brand names. Maybe if I slip, I'll mention something about the way matzah that we give Hashgachah to. But I'm not going to mention brand names. But you should know it's an example. What I've seen is it's an example. What the Gemara says that olam hafachu, and what looks wonderful and great on the outside in the box, lav dafka, that's what's going on inside, and the other way around also. You not by how it looks or how heimish it looks or how much it costs. I saw recently 2 matzahs, both of which bakeries I've been at. One cost more than twice the other one, and the cheap one was much better Kashrus wise. You'd much rather eat the cheaper one than the more expensive one. I could tell you about that afterwards. What brand? But so it's really it's hard to tell. So we're going to just talk about different things. I'm not going to talk about egg matzahs. It's its own separate parsha. And mostly I'm going to talk about hand matzah. A little bit I'll tell you about machine matzah also, mainly about hand matzah. And one more introduction is I'm going to split what I'm going to say into 2 parts. There are 2 parts to matzah. One is making sure they're not chametz. That's the main thing because we can't eat chametz in Pesach. That's the first half. That's a big part of making matzah. And the second is making it Lishmah. At the Seder, you're supposed to eat matzah that was made l'shem matzah's mitzvah. We'll talk about that, what that means. So the second half is how to make sure the matzah is Lishmah. Okay, so the first half, let's start with our first half, is avoiding making chametz. So the most simple rule, and everybody knows this rule, that if you have one of the 5 grains, wheat, rye, spelt, oats, or barley, one of the 5 grains, and you mix it with water, and you don't bake it within 18 minutes, it turns into chametz. Okay, that's a rule just about everybody knows that rule. Okay, that's the most obvious rule. The 2 other details of that rule there's 2 other details that are important, and that is, one is that if the dough becomes warm or hot as part of mixing it, or just done because it's hot outside, then it comes chametz in less than 18 minutes. Okay, that's one rule. 18 minutes is only at ambient temperature. It could be faster if it's hotter. And the second is, the opposite of that is that if somebody's like massaging the dough, it's called esek, they're working with the dough, they're doing something with the dough that prevents it from becoming chametz. And for that reason, you could actually have dough that spends 5 hours before you bake it, and it won't become chametz either. As long as you're doing esek, it doesn't become chametz. Okay, so the 18 minutes is the simple rule, but it could go to opposite extremes. It could way faster than 18 minutes. It could go much longer than 18 minutes also. Okay, there's also another side rule, which we're not really going to talk about. It comes up just a drop, and that is if you add other things besides flour and water, it could become chametz faster. It happens to come up in bakeries. Some bakeries won't use city water because of that, because it has chlorine in it, and they're concerned that the chlorine is considered an added ingredient, and therefore they won't use water that has chlorine in it. Most people assume that's not a problem because you don't taste it, you never notice it. But anyhow, there's such a thing. They'll use well water, they use whatever, special water. So matzah bakeries, to avoid chametz, are watching these 3 things. The 18 minutes is one thing, that is avoiding heat, and maximizing the esek. Making sure that the dough is always being worked with so that it should not become chametz. Okay, so those are 3 parts to what goes on to making matzah not be chametz. Okay, and I'm therefore going to divide my parts into what I say in 3 parts. First, in 18 minutes. Okay, everybody make sure that from the time the flour and the water mix together till it gets into the oven is less than 18 minutes. Okay, there's like no such thing. Sometimes in a machine matzah bakery, it could take 10-12 minutes. It could take a long time, but within 18 minutes, everyone's got it's in the oven. That's like never happened such a thing. That doesn't get in within 18 minutes. Okay, but what makes it more complicated is that only is true of the piece of dough. I make a piece of dough, roll it out, and we put it into the oven. But if the dough gets left someplace along the way on the machinery, on the table that you're working on the rolling pin that you have, on some places there's a piece of dough left, that piece of dough might sit for more than 18 minutes. So the actual matzah that I'm working with, the piece that's rolled out that I actually end up eating, that big piece, that have for sure got in within 18 minutes. But there may be other pieces that are left behind that are trailing someplace or whatever, that those would be there for longer than 18 minutes, they would become chametz. Okay, so because of that, a bakery has a clock that goes for 18 minutes, and when that clock ends at 18 minutes, what they do is everything gets cleaned up. Okay, we want to make sure that something didn't get left someplace on the back of something in the corner or someplace. So at every 18 minutes, the clock rings, and everything gets cleaned up as well as it can be, so there should be nothing left over from one to the next. Okay, that's part of making sure we don't have it in 18 minutes. So to do that, you design your bakery with as few cracks and crevices where food can get stuck at. You give your workers the right kind of equipment. You give them blowers and brushes and rigs, whatever it takes in order to make sure that they can clean well. Okay, it has to do with how you design and how you plan what you're doing. Other people do is they'll make rules, like they'll tell their workers, this didn't used to be, but this is a modern problem. Okay, you can't touch your phone when you're in the bakery. Okay, and that's not just because they don't want to be distracted if they want it to work, because the guy's sticking it into his pocket and going like this every time he touches something. That's a potential place where he's going to leave a piece of dough now, and then an hour from now when he picks his phone up again, there's going to be a piece of dough coming across there. Yes, it happens, but they shouldn't. Okay. Other people they'll take is the rolling pins between one batch and another. Instead of just clean them off, they sand them down. They'll send it through a sanding machine to make sure we really made sure extra careful that there's nothing on. They have sinks, any place else that people are going to touch. They touch it. It's not hand controlled; it's foot controlled. Okay, so this way there's no concern that I'm getting something working but with a hand that touched it and left some dough from there last time. Okay, now some things are really hard to clean. Okay, some things. Okay, the hardest thing to clean is something called the redler. The redler is the thing that makes the holes in the matzah. Okay, it's got a zillion little pokey things that come out of it, and it's very hard to clean. So most people will have at least two of those. Okay, so we don't have to clean them in the minute between one batch and the next. In a minute or two, they don't have to clean the other one. Some places will have 3, 4, 5 of them. And that means it gives the guy who's doing the cleaning lots of time. He's not pressured to get his thing done so quickly because someone's waiting for him in a few minutes. I have to have it ready. I got a whole bunch of them. The marks are hanging on the wall. I have a whole bunch of them. This way, he cleans at his leisure. He cleans in a way that he knows he can get it clean. Okay.
How do they clean it?
How do they clean it? So it depends. Some things get cleaned in water. But okay, once you clean it with water, now we have to get it dry then also. Okay, so some clean it with water, with brushes. People use for the redlers. People use like a I don't know what you call it, like a brusher, like an electric brush, like you might see like in a shoe shine, or like it's like hard bristle brushes that spin around like electronically. It spin, you push a button and it spins to scrape away, and then guys clean it, and then a mashgiach checks it, and then but there's a lot goes into making sure it's clean, or ear blowing. There's things that go into making it clean. But do you want the guy to be rushed? You want the guy to do it at in a way that he knows he has plenty of time. But there's another 3 of them hanging on the wall. I'm not in a rush to get this one clean. It will take more time. Or if I have to walk out for a minute, it's not like if I walked out for a minute. Oh my gosh, it's never going to get clean. You know?
They use chemicals, soap, or
yeah, whatever that's going to take. You know, I haven't seen people using soap for that because then we have to get it cleaned off also. But potentially, it does make a difference.
what about disposable?
Sorry, not to get to that. There's lots of stuff that people use for disposables. Like workers will wear disposable gloves, and they have aprons, and that could be switched every 18 minutes. Okay, every 18 minutes, instead of cleaning hands, which is harder to do. Think about it. Every time they clean their hands, someone's got to check them to make sure they got all the dough from under their fingernails and etc. A lot of places will do is they have disposable gloves. Everybody wear gloves, and every 18 minutes you change your gloves.
What about equipment?
So I'll get the equipment 1 second. There are people who don't like disposable gloves. They have this idea that it's going to make it hotter on the dough. So that's some people have this idea in their head. Then on the tables that the people work on, there's a lot of places where you use paper on the tables, and paper could be thrown out each time as a way of cleaning it, make it easier. You don't have to clean it. Okay, or really common is the poles that they put the dough in and out of the oven on gets wrapped in a paper that's supposed to get disposed every time. I mean, like Mamash, we could every single time get a new piece of paper onto it. Okay?
That was my job. I was a paper wrapper.
Very good. Very good. Very
Years
good.
ago.
What normally happens? They take a break in between each run, or they
Every 18 minutes, when the clock goes off, the whole place stops and everything gets cleaned and changed, etc.
So if they only do the actual runs every 2-3 times an hour.
Right, well, so let's say it's 18 minutes of making matzah and 2 minutes to clean up, because they're really good at it. They're practiced of doing this, and then they get right back to work. It's also a drop staggered, because the people at the beginning of the line finish before the people at the end. So those people are cleaning and Hashgachah are checking them, and they're getting started while the people at the end are still finishing up, and so it's a drop stagger. Okay. Just one thing, when you have paper disposable, you have to watch out that the paper doesn't have starch on top of it. That would really be pathetic. If you made your matzah on stuff that had wheat starch on top of it, that would really be sad. But so they do check it. Okay, so that's all that's done to make sure. Disposable equipment. There's such a thing as disposable redlers. That's I don't think that's very common in commercial bakeries. I know there are people in town who do that because you're doing a little production for whatever. I don't think that's a common.
Because it's expensive.
Yeah, and you can clean them. It's better to say, give me 5 real ones than to get a bunch of little cuties like the little plastic. Yeah. Okay.
Later.
What? The Play-Doh ones, right? Correct. Okay. So that was 18 minutes. Okay, that's pretty straightforward. Okay, now then we have the next thing is we have to avoid heat. Okay, because I told you heat makes it become chametz faster. So there's some halachic requirements about heat. Okay, some halachic requirements. Like for example, when you grind wheat, you can't use it that day. You can't use the flour that day. It has to sit to cool down from the process. Okay, there are many. I don't know. There are many bakeries that actually grind their own wheat. They harvest the wheat themselves. They grind themselves. You can't use it right away. You have to wait. It has to sit. You have to use mayim shalanu. Mayim shalanu means when you draw the water one day in the evening, and then it sits for the whole night to get to ambient temperature, so that it won't be hot from the outside when you use that water. Because these are halachic requirements. There's another requirement. There's certain angles of sunlight that considered to make the dough hot, and therefore a matzah bakery doesn't have windows inside of it, okay? Because there's all kinds of interesting that you would have never guessed, these halachas, about certain kinds of sunlight and shade from the sun that affect how you make matzah, okay? So a matzah bakery shouldn't have windows in it.
Better do it during an eclipse.
What do you say? During the eclipse. Okay, I have to look at the din again. No, the din is sort of counterintuitive. Direct sunlight is better than indirect sunlight, so I'm not sure. I have to think about the eclipse. Okay, I have to think about it. Okay. But so those are like halachic requirements. But there's one obvious issue that there is with heat, and that is in your matzah bakery you have an oven that's 1,000 degrees. Literally, it's 1,000 degrees. Okay, it has no door on it. Okay, it's always open, right? To keep putting matzah in and out of it, and you got a 1,000-degree oven sitting there. Well, that's going to make the room boiling hot. It's an automatic when you're making it and you have a matzah bakery that you have this problem, a built-in problem of a hot oven that's going to make everything hot. So this really has to do with the building of the facility. So you put a wall in between them. There's a baking room and there's a kneading room. Okay, and there's a wall in between them with a really small opening between to get the dough in and out. And then if you're more advanced, you put in fans and air conditioners at the right places to try to keep the heat over there and the ambient temperature over there. Okay, it's in this just Pesach guide. You see a thermometer, a little thermometer. They put a little thermometer. We stuck on the other side of that window. Just stuck it on to see at our matzah bakery to see what's the temperature on the other side and how successful are we at being with the fans and the air conditioning. However, the guys thought about it, how good were they at making it that the temperature should be not hot on this side, it's hot on that side.
Don't say you can't make matzah on a hot day. They never air conditioning 500 years ago.
You can't back. Actually, it does talk about again sunlight. With sunlight, you can't. No,
so the day is hot, you know.
Yes, yeah. I'm not saying it has to be ice outside. I'm saying, but it's 1,000 degrees in there, so we want to minimize. We want to keep some control. That we should Okay, so that then the last part of it is that when you take the matzah and you stick it into the oven, okay, well you put it into a lot of heat right now. If it bakes, no problem. Okay, if it doesn't bake in the oven, then we have a real serious problem because then it's become super fast. Think about how hot it got in the oven. If it didn't bake in the oven, you'd have a problem, and that's why this is not part of baking it. This is when you take the matzah out of the oven. They check them for kfulas and nefuchas, for folded matzahs and matzahs that bubbled up, because the spot that's covered up, if it folded over or bubbled up, there's a part that's shielded from the heat, might not have baked properly, and that's why it becomes chametz right away. As soon as you pull it out, it's going to start becoming chametz. That's why you check for kfulas and nefuchas.
Is the problem at the entrance of the oven? If you have time,
Is that what about it?
it gets hot as it goes in before you.
It does. So you have no choice but to put it in, right? There's a magical. I mean, I went once to a place, someplace that had like an air conditioning blowing right at that spot. The mom was like frozen at that spot, because they were trying to. But I mean, like Jesse said, I mean, it got to be realistic, It's got to. Also, Ramosha says that yatsa lead display is enough to stop it from becoming chametz. So you actually, maybe if it's warm, it's okay, But there was one place. This was a machine matzah bakery. It was like very hot over there, like for 3-4 feet as the matzah was coming in. It was on a belt. It was like a preheating. No, I'm sorry. I take it back. The oven itself was designed. Let's say the oven. It's a machine matzah bakery. So let's say the oven was a belt, was let's say 30 feet long, but the fire didn't start till 10 feet in. And the beginning was like a preheating stage, like the beginning had no fire on it, so it was just like a nice warm chamber, like a proofer,
I didn't mess up bad because you slide right in.
What'd you say?
You could close the hole
In where?
in the machine mats.
Yeah.
You don't have
Oh, okay. But I'm saying this is like really. I was the one who found it. Someone else noticed it. It's like the beginning, the first couple of feet had no fire to them. It was just hot over there. Yeah, it wasn't. That was bad.
It is bad.
That was bad. Yeah, that was bad. I didn't find it. Someone else found it. But okay.
When you say it's less than 18 minutes, is it a certain amount or just relative that it's less than you have less than 18
So
minutes?
the thing is, we don't know how fast it is, and we're like sort of stuck. We don't know what to do, which I'm about to talk in a second. We don't know, so we avoid heat because we won't know. Will it be in 16 minutes? Will it be in 4 minutes? Will it be in a minute and a half? We don't know what it is, so we avoid those kind of things. Okay, and the last part of avoiding chametz is to maximize the esek, to always be working. The dough should be in motion, not in motion. The dough, someone should be kneading or working with the dough. The Shulchan Aruch says that the matzah, because that should not sit afilu rega echad, okay, even for 1 minute. Okay, the Mishnah Berurah says, okay, that's an exaggeration. It's not possible that your dough won't sit even for 1 second. I mean, how is it possible from the time you mix the flour and water till it gets in the oven, it'll never sit even for 1 second? But it gives you a feel. Okay, we're trying to make sure the dough is always, some kind of esek is happening. Someone's working the dough or kneading it or maneuvering it in some way, which prevents from becoming chametz. Okay, we're trying to prevent chametz by keeping the dough. So the word in motion is wrong. It's a mistake that some people have made. It doesn't mean in motion. If it's moving on a belt from here to there, that's not esek. Esek means someone's actually working it. So one of the things the Shulchan Aruch says a rule is, in order to do that, when you make matzah, you should always make sure the amount of flour that's in the batch is less than a shir challah. Okay, the shir challah has nothing to do with this. Shir challah is the amount you have to be mafresh challah from. But it's telling you use very little flour when you make the matzah, because this way you'll be able to. It won't be so hard to work with it. If you make a dough that's this big, how are you going to work with that such a big amount of dough? So if you have a smaller amount, you're going to be able to work with it. Okay, so some bakeries do faithfully what the Shulchan Aruch says, which is they make less than a shir challah. They make the shir challah. Others say, well, there's 2 shir challahs. There's the amount of challah that you have to be mafresh without a bracha, and the mafresh with a bracha. So they say we can go up to the higher amount. Okay, and then there are places that are like some say who do that the higher amount, which is seemingly not what the Shulchan Aruch had in mind. And other ones, the one bakery we asked, this I didn't go to. I just asked them, how much flour do you have in your batch? They said, well, we used to have this amount, which was less than the shir challah. The people who supply us the flour started giving us more, and we've been fighting back with them. Okay, there's like a tug of war. They want, for whatever reason, want to send them more or less. And then I went to one of the bakeries I went to, where they do this higher amount. They get under the shir challah, but under the larger shir challah. And it was watching these people was literally an example of what the Shulchan Aruch was saying. They made their dough, and at a certain point, the dough was in like a roll. The dough was in one long roll before they cut into pieces. And what they would do is they would basically cut it in half, put one half on the side, work with this half at this time, and when if they dealt with this one, then they pick up the other half because they couldn't manage the whole dough at once. It was too big. It was like a picture of we should like paste it into your mishaburi. Like that was an example. What the Shulchan Aruch says, don't work with too much at a time, and that's what they did. They said, oh, sometimes we have a lot of workers and we could do both. But basically, okay, they broke it in half, and he got to work on this side. So that's a halachic responsibility. You have to make sure you have a dough that's not too big, not too much flour in the thing.
If you have like a whole slew of people working on it, and you have the big dough and you're cutting it up right away, that's still.
So the Mishnah Berurah says a good point. The Mishnah Berurah says there are those who say if there's a lot of workers and you can have a bigger amount. We'll talk in a second. In machine matzah, it's way more than a shir challah. Based on the Mishnah Berurah says it's better to avoid that anyhow. It's true. I should have said that. The Mishnah Berurah says that it's okay. It's not the best thing, but it's okay if there are a lot of workers. But there's got to be a lot of workers. I'm telling you, I watched the place who said is. I watched the guy cut it in. He put the piece on the side that he wasn't doing today because he couldn't work with so much dough at a time. So
But the original mixer is still the whole dough.
say it again.
Afterwards, they split it. The original guy who puts the flour in they put the flour in water, not the original.
He was
mixer.
able to manage. Yes, correct. But
He's doing a larger amount.
yeah, but what's the difference? The point is, if you have an amount that you
help that you have workers afterwards and you split up afterwards.
well, if he could do it, are you saying the guy won't be able to handle such a big dough? If he put 50 pounds of flour, he wouldn't be able to handle it if he had a lot of work.
Even though you have splitting it afterwards.
Okay. Look, I mean, it depends on what's possible. Okay. So now, as far as having esek all the time, now we took logistically, how do you make sure that you have esek all the time? How do you make sure that someone's working with this dough all the time? So an important part of that is to synchronize the production. That means to say is that you have to have the process has to be that you have the right amount of workers at each stage, so the dough keeps on moving from place to place. What I mean is, in one place, there were the people at the beginning of the process worked much faster than the people at the end of the process. So what happened was the people at the beginning, they did their job and they passed the dough on to the next people, and those people weren't ready for them yet. Okay, the people there weren't. I don't know, were there too many people at the beginning or too few people at the end? Whatever it wasn't in sync. So the people at the beginning of the process were working too fast relative to the people at the end of the process. So they could either slow down or they could speed up, whichever one. But the setup wasn't done well to have people in sync. That the dough, it forced the dough to sit because these people worked too fast relative to the people at the other end. Okay, other places are they're more organized. They know how we work this fast, and then we get it in time for you people like that. Okay, and the other thing is that okay, we planned it a certain way, but things don't always work the way they're supposed to. Okay, things don't always work the way they're supposed to. Okay, so what's the so to speak backup plan? Okay, what's the choice that happens? So some people do nothing, and the dough will just sit because nobody's ready to take it from there. Other places, there's a mashgiach here. Okay, the mashgiach has that responsibility aside from his oversight of what's going on is that he fills in. If dough's going to sit someplace, he pulls in and does esek on that spot. Okay, that's part of his job is to say is if dough ever gets stuck for whatever reason, we planned it right, but something went wrong, he fills in. Okay, in another place, I only remember seeing this in one place. The people who need the dough at the beginning, okay, they're doing the kneading, and then it gets passed on to be cut up and done further. Those people. Okay, let me take the other side. Most places is I do my kneading. When I'm finished, I pass it to the next person because I did it. My dough is ready to be passed on. In this place, the people just kept on kneading it, and when the people want the dough, they said, "Please send us a dough now. Send it over to me." In other words, you finished what your job is, but you got to do it now. There's a different reason why you're doing it. Now you're not doing it because you want to make a good dough. Now you're doing it because you don't want it to become chametz. So I remember only one place seeing that is that they kept on working until the other guys called them and said, "Give me your thing afterwards," which I thought was a good idea. As far as this whole idea that we want to have esek, we want to try to do what the Shulchan Aruch said to get a filu rega echad, it shouldn't sit by itself. If you look at the big picture of that is how long does it take from when we mix the flour and water together until it gets into the oven? And the shorter the amount of time that is the less chance you had that it was ever sitting because we get extra time. So it stretches in matzah bakeries from 6 minutes. It could take from when you mix the flour water until it gets into the oven. Again, you're allowed to do that, but if you have 6 minutes, there's potential for lots of time in the middle when the dough breaks. The other places, I'll mention us, 90 seconds, that it takes from when you mix the flour water till it gets into the oven. Okay?
90 seconds?
90 seconds. Yeah, 90 seconds it's in the oven. So if it's in the oven in 90 seconds, there isn't obviously much time for the dough to sit. Okay? I'm not saying we can't do things to make sure it works well, but I'm saying you already cut yourself down to there wasn't much chance for it to sit there if it went from here to there. Okay? Okay, and the last is sometimes the bottleneck ends up being putting the dough into the oven. Okay, everything's moving along the way it's supposed to be, and the last stop is someone takes the dough, they put it onto a stick, and it goes into the oven. Okay, and at some places that's where it gets stuck. It might get stuck because they decide it's only efficient if we put in 5 matzahs at a time. Okay, we won't do anything until we have 5 matzahs to put in, because why should I put in 2 matzahs into the oven? Okay, what that means is that if the people don't get their matzahs moving along, the dough is just sitting there because it's just waiting until I have 5. And other people say no. As soon as we got something on the pole, I put it into there. Okay, if they're all coming together, I put it in 5. But if I get 2, I put in 2. Whatever it is, I put in. Okay, it also says with how many workers you have. Okay? If you have the same person puts in and out, that means is he's busy taking dough matzahs out of the oven or working with the matzah in the oven. He can't put new ones into it. As opposed to if you have 2 people, so then. My job is just to put dough. I keep putting stuff into. I go take the pole, put it in. I take the pole and put it in. Someone else's business to keep them busy in the oven and take them out and that kind of stuff. So that means is you're never waiting for me because I'm always ready to put it. I put one in as soon as I come back to take the next one. As many as there, I'll take as many. But if I'm busy, I have to turn them over. I have to take them out. Then you get stuck at that bottleneck. Okay. So now let's just pause for a minute and compare these 3 things that we do to make sure that the dough doesn't become chametz. I've been talking about hand matzah. Compare them to machine matzah. So, of the 3 things of avoiding heat, machine matzah bakery, except for the one that I told you about, could do just as good of a job as a hand matzah bakery. Okay, no reason why they can't avoid heat, just like a machine matzah. They can fix our what's called the oven is where it's supposed to be. We use ma'im shalom, and all the things that we have to do. They can do just as good of a job as a hand matzah bakery. But the other 2, in getting in the 18 minutes and the esek, that's where they're not as good as a hand matzah bakery. That is like this. Of course, I told you, even in a machine matzah bakery, they get the dough. The dough gets into the oven within 18 minutes. That's not a question. It gets in within 18 minutes. But the huge difference between a machine matzah bakery and a hand matzah bakery is that it come out every single one. I'm not saying everyone. It come out every single machine matzah bakery. Doesn't stop every 18 minutes. It could go for 10 hours straight. Literally, it can go all day long. Okay, it doesn't stop every 18 minutes. There's an exception, but as a rule, nobody stops their machines. Every hand matzah bakery stops every 18 minutes, and Kamat, no machine bakeries ever stop all day long. They go for 10 hours straight. So, which means is that this concern which we have is that there's going to be dough sitting around someplace is much bigger. We have there could be dough any place that could sit around for who knows how long until it gets back in. So it's not like they close their eyes to that. They're aware of that concern. So they try to build machinery that has as little places where dough can get stuck. It's really hard with machinery. It's easier when you're working on a table than it is on a machine. But okay, they do what they can to try to make as little as possible. And they give the workers all kinds of equipment to do it, blowers and brushes, all kinds of things to try to clean things while it's still running. But you have an automatic, you're fighting against machinery that's running. You're trying to clean something off while it's still being used. I mean, imagine trying that you have a mixer in your house and you try to clean it while you're mixing stuff with it. Okay, it's really hard to imagine. So on occasion, there are some doubles, like the actual mixing bowl. They usually have more than one. They make batches of dough. They have a second mixing bowl. So the mixing bowl you can work at a time. But like the so to speak tables that it's working on, the redler that's the thing that's making the holes in it, the rollers, all those things, those are not replaceable. So imagine you're trying to clean this equipment while it's running. Okay, so it's a really difficult job. Not always very successful. So it's a problem. Okay, so that's a downside to using the machine matzah bakery is that they don't stop every 18 minutes. Okay, now from the other side, from the side of the esek, so I told you esek means we want to keep it moving, we never stop. So the idea of synchronizing and keeping things in line, machines do better than people. Okay, because the machinery is set up, it keeps going from process to process. It's built that it works. Okay, so it works, and things are in sync. That's true, but the other side is that it's almost part of the system is that dough has to sit, okay? Because when you build a part of making machinery that should work smoothly is there's going to automatically be breaks. Like for example, one of the worst ones is you mix the dough and then you dump it into what we call hopper, into this basically a big box, and from there it gets rolled and it gets pulled to its places and rolled and like that. Okay, the machinery needs dough to always be there. You always have to have dough waiting to be pulled into being rolled. Okay, so that means you have a big thing of dough, a big container of dough, and the machine pulling from there to start rolling it out, and to take it out and to make it into sheets, into rolls. Well, that thing that holds the dough can never run out. It always has to have dough in it. Well, in order to always have dough in it, you have to have, it's like we call it like a surge tank. There always has to be a lot in there to make sure there's enough. Okay, that means stuff could sit there for a very long time and just sitting there waiting to be pulled into the machinery. Okay, in a hand bakery, we would never do that. Here, it could sit for a very long time over there. Of course, I should have mentioned they use way more than shechal. Okay, but the most egregious way that they ruin, that they make a problem when they make machine matzah, is that there's a process when you make crackers that's called lamination. Okay, when you make crackers, where you form a dough and then you lay it out. I should have brought a video for this. They lay it out. They're like it's coming in big sheets. They're like as wide as this table, and they lay out the machine pulls the dough to this side and then folds it over on itself, and then folds it over on itself again, and folds over in these very big folds on it, and then it goes from there slowly over to a roller that rolls into a very thin amount, and then it gets thinner and thinner and thinner till it's the right size of what you want for your cracker or your matzah in this case. Okay, lamination is really good for crackers. Okay, lamination is awful for matzah. Okay, well, think what you're doing. You're laying it out and you're like folding it over itself a bunch of times, and then it's slowly moving from here to there to get rolled and turned into a matzah. Okay, it could sit. I kid you not, it could sit for 5 minutes. Okay, just sitting there with no chance of esek or anything happening to it, just sitting there. Okay? It's really awful. So I'm not sure exactly why people do it, but my concern is that the people who built it and this is conjecture, they went to someone and said, "Hi, we want to make crackers." They went to people who make machinery and said, "We want to make crackers, but we have a special rule. It has to be within 18 minutes. We have a special rule that it has to be able to clean better, this and that." So they took cracker technology and they adjusted it to fit to what they're trying to do over here, as opposed to saying, "I want to make matzah, and let's try. How can I automate the matzah that I'm trying to make?" So lamination is like part of it. You know what I mean? So some people do it better or worse, but the worst is like really bad. So Imam could sit there I feel Hashgachah is like hilarious. I mean, it's not anywhere near that. Literally, it could sit for many minutes just sitting there as it's being laid out. Okay, but overall, the idea of esek doesn't work so well with machines because you have lots of times that dough sits on. Okay, so to summarize, in avoiding chametz, we're at the end of the first part of avoiding chametz in our matzah.
Lamination is not esek.
Well, the process of taking a ball of dough and turning it into a thinner piece that you can laminate, that was an esek. But then putting it down on the table, that's not anything. Literally, someone's just like putting it down on the table and then folding it over and putting it down again on top of that. No one's touching it. No one's doing anything. It's just sitting there. They're just.
It's being.
No, there's a machine that's holding it and it's going like this. It's like this, and then it's folding it. And then it's folding it again like that. So this part is being held by a machine. The rest of it is just being folded over. Nothing being esek to my mind.
I'm saying it's still all that dough is being moved around. No,
it's moving, but
no, it's not the same as a conveyor belt. It's not just moving spatially. It's being. No.
Okay.
Yeah, the dough is touching each other.
Okay.
Maybe the top layer is moving, the bottom layer it's
Oh, then it's being compressed.
sitting on the thing.
Yeah.
Okay. I should bring a video. I'm not moved. Okay. So there were these three parts to making sure the matzah is not chametzik. It has to get it the 18 minutes and making sure there's nothing left over from that. There's esek and there's avoiding heat. In hand matzah bakeries, by and large, do a good job. Of course, there's better and worse. There's the different layers of how people could do that. The machine matzahs can do a fine job on the heat part of it, on the esek and the 18 minutes. I'm sorry, esek and the 18 minutes and the cleanliness. Not as, in my mind, not as good as the hand matzahs. Okay, now let's move to part 2. Okay, which is we have a matzah that's not chametzik, but if we want to use it at the seder, we have a requirement that it should be done Lishmah. Okay, that means it has to be made. It has to be made. Somebody watches the matzah being made, the process being made. Watch doesn't mean just eyeball. Watch it to make sure it doesn't become chametz. And when they do that watching, they have in mind that this actually might be used for the mitzvah. Okay, there's a potential that this matzah might be used for the mitzvah. Okay, that's we do shimur lishmah. We watch it, meaning watch that it doesn't become chametz, and we watch that with in mind that it might be used for the mitzvah. We need that for the seder. In order to eat matzah at the seder, it has to be lishmah. It has to be matzah that's called matzah shmura. There are people who want that for the whole Pesach. Maybe it's a mitzvah to eat it for the whole Pesach, maybe not. But for sure, for the seder, we need to have matzah that's made lishmah. So let's think a few parts of that. So there are different opinions in the Rishonim about which part of the process has to be lishmah. Okay, and the three shittas are: one shitta says it's from the time that you harvest it, because from the time you harvest it, it could possibly become chametz. When it's attached to the ground, it can't become chametz. So you have to do it from the time you harvest it. Is the first chance it could become chametz. From then it has to be shmura. You have to watch it from that point to make sure it doesn't become chametz. Okay. Second sheet is mishas tchina. They used to grind flour with water mills. So we're now opening ourselves up at least to the possibility that water might be here. When you're harvesting, there's no water, but when we're grinding, there might be water. So that's a second sheet that you have to do from the shas katsira. Shas techina, from the grinding. And the last opinion is that you do it from the shas lisha, from the time when you actually you mix the flour and water together. At that point, if you do nothing, it will become chametz. So now that's a reason to do shmura from that time. Okay, so it's three different opinions. Is shmur from when it could become chametz, shmur when it's already starting to be a reasonable chance to become chametz, or shmur when if you don't do anything, it's going to become chametz. That's when you have to watch it from. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch says it's better to use for the mitzvah shmur from the beginning, from katsira, from the time it was harvested. But if not, if you can't get that, you could rely on the lenient opinions. Okay, all hand matzah that I know of, all hand matzah is shmur misas katsira from the time that you harvested it. Machine matzah, as a rule, is not. As a rule, machine matzah is only from the time of kneading, from shas lisha, from the time when you knead it. It's not shmur from before that. What do you have to do to make it shmur?
So it's not inherent, right? They could have done it in shas.
There is such a thing as machine shmur matzah. You could buy machine shmur matzah, but it would be specially marked. But the regular box of Yehuda matzah you buy in the store is not going to be shmur from shas.
So you're saying that the machine shmur matzah is done from harvesting?
Yes, yeah. That's what when it says machine shmura, all matzah is shmur from the time of lisha.
Okay.
All matzah is they're marching at l'shem mitzvah from the time that they mix the flour and water together. Yes, because people that for sure doing that. But when it says shmur, it means it's shmur according to all opinions. That's what the word shmur means. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention this. Well, because it's in my head. If you want machine matzah that they clean it every 18 minutes, it's called 18-minute matzah, and that matzah is usually it's the first matzah of the day. So the machinery has been down, and it's the first matzah of the day. It's made within 18 minutes. You could buy 18-minute matzah. They stop the whole day and clean everything also. But if you want machine matzah that's been cleaned clean the machinery thoroughly before you start it, it's called 18-minute matzah. Okay. So
that's the highest of the high.
In machine matzah, yeah. There are also brands that do that. There is such a thing, I can tell you about it afterwards, that actually they close down the machinery every 18 minutes. But most machine matzah you buy is not like that. Okay, so some people say that in order to be shmura, all you got to do is what I said to you. You got to watch it with in mind that it couldn't become chametz, and we're going to use it for the mitzvah. And other people say is that no, when you watch it, it's not the person watching, it's the person doing the labor has to have that in mind, this shmura. So what I mean is it that there's a mashgiach standing there and he's doing shmura for the mitzvah, he's making sure that's okay for the mitzvah, that's what has to make it shmura, or is it the guy actually harvesting or kneading the dough? He's the guy who has to have that in mind. Okay, so the Mishnah Berurah on that says that for katsira and techina, for the two early steps, it's okay for the person watching to do it. Enough, that's good enough. But for lisha, the person actually doing the work, that's the person who has to do it lishmah. Not that an outsider has to do it, the person himself has to do it lishmah. Some people are machmir, they do even the katsira and the techina lishmah. That's not so common. Okay, within making it shmura.
Could I ask a question?
Of course.
What about the matzah bakeries, having never been to one, that I know my son has visited, that the workers are not Jewish?
I'm about to get to them. Okay. I'm coming to them, don't worry. Okay, so it's best that the people who are making it Lishmah shouldn't just have it in their head that we're doing this Lishmah. They're supposed to verbalize it. It's actually in places that are more on top of it. They do it every time they start a new batch. So every 18 minutes, the people will say, we're doing this L'Shem Matzah's Mitzvah. But at least they should do it at the beginning of the day, the beginning of a shift, they should do it also. Okay, so now, you definitely have to have Lishmah from the time of Lisha, from the time you knead the dough. Okay, what's included in that? Okay, so the Magen Avraham says like this. He says, from the time when you add the flour and water together, that's considered Lisha. That's the time of kneading. Excuse me. So what has to be done Lishmah from this point on? So Magen Avraham says like this. It for sure includes 3 different things. One is Lisha, the kneading of the dough. Okay, that's one part. One is Aricha. I'll tell you what that means in a second. Put that on the side for you a second. And the last is baking. Okay, so those 3 parts, kneading the dough, Aricha, and baking, all have to be Lishmah. So the Magen Avraham gets it from a din has nothing to do with Pesach, it has to do with making bread. Okay, how he knows that those 3 things have to be included. He says. So
you're only speaking about hand matzah bakeries because none of this can be done in a machine matzah bakery.
Well, I'm going to get to machines, and we'll talk about machines in a second. But machine. It has to be shmura. What I mean is like this: the minimal amount every matzah is made shmura from the time of kneading the dough, because people can eat it at the seder. So whether machine matzah, we'll talk about whether they qualify, they don't qualify, but they're trying to do that. No, their goal is that it should be shmur from the time when you mix the flour and the water together. That is the goal. But I'm trying to figure which parts of that process have to be. So for sure, the kneading has to be done, the baking, and this thing in the middle called aricha, which I'm going to tell you what that means in a second. The Magen Avraham says, okay, there's another part in there that's unique to making matzah. You don't need it when you make bread, and that is making the holes, the reddling, making the holes in it. Bread doesn't need holes made in it to bake bread. When you make matzah, you make holes in it. I forgot to tell you this before, and you make holes in it to make sure it gets baked thoroughly through. Okay, that's you want it to make sure the heat penetrates all the way through. That's why you make holes in it. So Magen Avraham says, I'm not sure if you have to have Lishmah for the person making the holes in it. And the Magen Avraham says he's not sure. The Mishnah says it's better to do that. You don't have to, and everybody make sure that that's done Lishmah also. Okay, it doesn't. Magen Avraham says he's not sure about that. Mishnah says it's better, and that's what most people do. So what is this word aricha? What's this middle thing called aricha? What does that mean? The word aricha means like to arrange or to set it up. Okay, so I'm going to tell you 4 steps that happen between when you mix the flour and the water together until you get to making the holes in it. Okay, 4 steps. The first step, after you mix the flour and water, there's someone who does an initial kneading of the dough. Okay, they take the flour, it's just a mush, it's just a mess, like mud, and they mix it together to make like a ball of dough. Okay, they make a first kneading of that dough. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is that dough gets a second kneading that's done to it, with a much more intense kneading that's done to it, usually with a big metal pole. Okay, a second kneading that gets done to it. And when that person's finished, the dough ends up in this like a log, a long log shape. Okay, that's how he finishes to make it into a long. And now it's really fully kneaded. Okay, step number 3 is that log is cut into pieces. Okay, let's say the log is this big, it's cut into 12 pieces, and each one of those pieces is going to eventually be a matzah. Okay, he cuts it into the amount of pieces that are right for a matzah. And the last step is each person takes one of those pieces that he cut up and he rolls it out into being a matzah, into the shape of a matzah, and then it goes to the guy with the holes and gets put into the oven. Okay, so we have these 4 steps. Okay, so which of those 4 steps did Magen Avraham mean when he said aricha? Okay, so the first 2, the first kneading and the second kneading, that's lisha. That's what the Magen Avraham that's called lisha. Okay, so we have step 3 and step 4. Step 3 is we cut it into pieces, and step 4 is we roll those pieces into the shape of a dough. So the simple understanding is that both of those are aricha. Aricha means arranging it, making it ready to turn into a dough, and therefore both of those need to be done Lishmah. Okay, some have taken the position they say no, you don't have to roll dough. You don't have to roll dough. You could take that ball of dough and stick it into the oven also. You could bake a matzah out of this ball of dough. So the cut off pieces, when the guy cut the pieces, step number 3, he says, all the Magen Avraham meant was step number 3. But step number 4 is not included. And there's nothing, you don't need that to be done Lishmah. But step number 4 does not have to be done Lishmah. Now, of course, it's not worse than reddling. But they're saying, so reddling, the Magen Avraham wasn't sure about either. They say, so all you have to do is that the person who does the cutting has to be done Lishmah. But the person who does the rolling doesn't have to be doing it Lishmah. Okay, and that's going to play into our next step is, okay, so I just set you up with an argument, okay? Some people think that the person who rolls out the dough does not have to do it Lishmah. Only the person who cuts the dough has to do it Lishmah. But the simple understanding is that the word aricha means both the person who cuts the dough into pieces and the person who rolls it out has to be done lishma. Okay, I'll put that piece of information in your head. I'm going to get back to it in 1 second. So, who is the person who? How could you make things be done lishma? So the din is, anybody who's an adult Jewish person could do it, man or lady, it makes no difference. A person who's not Jewish is not able to do that. A person who's not Jewish is not qualified, and the reason is because he doesn't care about the mitzvah. He doesn't even know there's a mitzvah. So we assume he has no intention. He can't keep on his head that this is being done for a mitzvah. You could tell him to do that, but it doesn't mean anything to him. Okay, he doesn't care about the mitzvah. Okay? The question is, what about somebody who doesn't care about mitzvahs? He's a Jewish person, but he overall doesn't care about mitzvahs. He might know that there's a mitzvah of matzah, but doesn't overall care about mitzvahs. Should we say that he has in mind, he knows that this is being done for the mitzvah, he's a Jewish person, he could have in mind to do it for the mitzvah? Or do you say is, well, he doesn't care about other mitzvahs, so if he doesn't care about other mitzvahs, he's not gonna pay attention. It's not important to him, he won't care about this thing. Okay, that's a question. How should we treat this person? Should he be qualified or should he not be qualified? Okay, so in a hand matzah bakery, all the workers who do jobs that everyone agrees have to be done lishma will only use workers who they know are Jewish, that's for sure. And within that, they'll make sure people who they know care about mitzvahs. They do other mitzvahs. They daven every day. They put on tefillin. They keep kosher and things like that. Okay, they will make sure about that. So the person who's kneading the dough will be someone like that. The person who puts the dough into the oven will be a person who's for sure a Jewish person who keeps mitzvahs. What about the people in between? Okay, so the guy who cuts the dough will also be like that. Okay, the big difference between one bakery and the next will be is what about the people rolling out the dough? That's what Mrs. Mars is talking about. What about the people who roll out the dough? Who are doing the rolling, what I call the fourth step over there. So, in some places, they say those people, that's part of making it Lishmah. The person who's doing that, the Mishnah says, the person who's doing the actual work has to do it Lishmah. So that person needs to be a person who keeps mitzvahs and who's a Jewish person who keeps mitzvahs. Other places either say is, nah, it doesn't make a difference who does that job. You can even have people who are not Jewish who are doing that job. Or they, for lack of a better word, they pay lip service to the idea, yes, we need someone who's Jewish. So they say to the employee when you come into work, they say, hi, you want to work in my bakery? Sure. Are you Jewish? They say, yes. Okay, no problem. Fine. You're qualified. You can do the job. Okay. You keep mitzvahs? Yes. Okay. You could do the job. Okay. I contrast that to when someone comes upstairs and applies for a letter from the Beis Din that says, hi, I want to prove that I'm Jewish, go to Eretz Yisrael. They don't say, hi, are you Jewish? And they get them, no, that doesn't work, okay? You have to go through a lot of hoops to prove that, in fact, you're a Jewish person, okay? To be able to take that job, you want to go to Israel and get married. But over here, some people, again, they pay just lip service by just saying is, hi, are you Jewish? Yes. You keep mitzvahs? Yes. Okay, fine, you could do the job, okay? So, this idea of using the rolling people should not be people who are Jewish or not be Shem term mitzvahs. It's really 50 years ago. Okay, it was really common 50 years ago. There's actually even a difference between then and now, and that is because for whatever reason it became the industry of Russian women. Okay, for whatever reason, 50 years ago there was people actually had more confidence that they were Jewish. The Jews coming from Russia at that time was more confidence than they had nowadays that they're actually to know that they're Jewish. But it's a big dividing line between some places and other places. Who does that work in between the rolling part of it? Do they feel that they need someone who's Jewish? They feel someone who keeps Torah mitzvahs, or they feel they don't, or they do the just lip service to this idea and check on the person. Hi, are you Jewish? Yes, you're qualified. You can do the job. Okay. Last, I know this is going on for a long time. I'm almost finished. The last is, in making Lishmah, people think, I even heard one person who makes matzah saying, we haven't changed anything in 1,000 years. We're making our matzah exactly the way they made it 1,000 years ago. Okay? Which of course is silly. It's not true. Because
how would he know that? No, I mean, how can he make such a claim?
Well, that's a good question. It's
With Masorah?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's a very good question.
He's very old.
But even without asking that question, you only have to open your eyes and you see he's not doing like 1,000 years ago. They use stainless steel. They use big poles for banging and doing things. Of course not. They didn't have disposable paper that they ran over the tables 1,000 years ago, right? There's lots of things that didn't happen.
Thicker matzah.
Did they have thicker matzah? That's true also, right? 1,000 years. Mom, if you go back long enough, actually the matzah was this thick also. That's true. So but the truth is, so there's been lots of advances, and by and large, people were very happy with them, and they thought about it. They didn't quickly maybe jump into new ideas, but they took to new ideas and were willing to make changes. But I don't know, 150 years ago, the Industrial Revolution came along, and people came along and they said this, forget about just making better things. Not only could you get a pole that I could sand down your pole in between each run, I could put paper on your sticks. Not only could I do that, but they said we can make machinery that could do this. Okay? And it made the price of matzah went down dramatically. The machine is, of course, much more efficient than people doing it by hands. And people had all kinds of questions then whether making that matzah was making it Lishmah. Okay? Whether is it considered that it was made Lishmah when it was made by a machine? Because the machine makes it. A Jewish person started the machine, he pushed the button or whatever it is it takes to crank up to get the machine going. So the question was, is that made Lishmah or is it not made Lishmah? And that was a very big disagreement 150 years ago. The many Jewish people, I would say most Jewish people at their Seder eat machine-made matzah. Okay, most of them are eating machine-made matzah because there's a legitimate opinion that said that's considered Lishmah. Okay, but most of the people who live in West Rogers Park, most of the people of the former people who consider themselves more Sharm Torah mitzvahs or more careful what they want to do, they'll eat handmade matzah. Okay, not taking on that opinion at the Seder. What do you have to say? Talk.
No, a lot of briskers use machine, and a lot of people in Eretz Israel.
Yes,
they use.
It's
machines.
true. Yes, it's true. Okay, and the reason why those people choose, why they specifically choose machine, they feel that the machine does a better job of avoiding chametz. I don't know what was going on 150 years ago. I really don't know what was going on 150 years ago. From what I was seeing, I really question that position. Again, they're doing it because 150 years ago maybe it did do a better job. Today I'm not. I'd be very apprehensive about that. No, that it does a better job of avoiding chametz than the hand matzah. But as far as Lishmah, they're taking a position that it's Lishmah, even though the machine did it, because a Jewish person runs the machine, and the person running the machine can do it l'shem matzah's mitzvah. Okay, and that's a long-standing argument, not for today to talk about. But there's an in-between that's come up in the past bunch of years. Of course, we're leaders in that. An in-between that came up in the past couple of years, and that's people who found devices, we'll call them, as a way to make the handmade matzah more efficient. Okay, they're sort of like a hybrid over here. Okay, like instead of doing things by hand, they do things by foot because your foot is more powerful than your hand is. So they do something with a hand instead of with a foot. They have instead of this big metal pole that people use to bang on the matzah for the kneading of the dough. Okay, it's really heavy. Okay, so people who have hydraulics to help lift that up. Okay, so the person bangs it down by hand, but he lifts it up with hydraulics. Okay, that's a device. They have, instead of the matzah being taken out of the oven by hand, which is, aside from work, it's distraction for the people doing it. There's a belt that takes it out of the oven. Okay, well, there's rollers that are work on a crank instead of working just by hand, rolling like this. So there are all kinds of these in between devices. So some people say is, well, basically that's a machine matzah. Okay, and the other people who say is, no, it's a really hand matzah because everything that's being done there is being done by the person doing it. And there's been a split. Okay, another, so to speak, split. Okay, and so to speak.
What makes a machine?
What do you say?
It looks like a machine.
So that's a good question. It's a good question. So the some people take that position. It tends to be people from Hasidic background who says we want to do it the way it always was. We've done the same way for 1,000 years in our minds. So we want to do it the same way. We don't want to make any change. That's one way of looking at it. And the other side is the other people who say no, it really is hand matzah. Everything is being done by the person's work. But I'm just mentioning that's another divide, so to speak, in how matzah is made Lishmah.